admitting people in and all that kind of fun stuff. All right, cool. We're going to go ahead and get started, I think. We're recording this session, so just FYI for folks, if you don't want to be on video or anything like that, just keep that in mind. But thank you all so much for joining. For those who I've not interacted with, though I feel like I recognize a lot of names on here, my name is Elliot Clay. I'm the Land Use Programs Director for the Illinois Environmental Council, working on all things agriculture and water-related issues and food systems and all of that kind of fun stuff, which we were going to be digging into today with everybody. I've also got Chad in the room. Chad, you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Hello, Chad Wallace, Rural Affairs Director here at Illinois Environmental Council. All things livestock and, work with Elliot.
Yep. I was going to say we're the ag team collectively here at IEC. Thank you all again for joining. This should be a really just kind of high level overview of, where we've been as an organization in terms of like agricultural policy. What I hope is that people can walk away with this with a better understanding of where we're at on some issues, and then leave a little time at the end for discussion for everybody. Really interested to hear if people have thoughts or opinions on different things or ideas for stuff. We're always interested in learning new things. So if there's something that you know about that that you think that we would want to know, like definitely let us know, because that's what we do. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here in a sec. Oh, where are we at? Cool. Okay, cool. Give me just one moment. Sorry, get my stuff in order. All right. Can folks see my screen okay? I'm hoping so. Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate it, everybody. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me check the waiting room one last time. Make sure I'm not missing anybody. Doesn't look like it. All right, cool. Again, thank you all for joining today. Well, IEC's been doing a series of these environmental policy 101s to kind of talk through different things that we work on. IEC works on a lot of different issues, whether it's in the energy space or water or zero waste, a lot of different things. But today we're going to be focusing on agriculture, which is, near and dear to Chad and I's heart, working at this organization. So excited to talk with you all about this. Let me see. There we go. So just as kind of a brief outline, we're going to do just a little overview of IEC as an organization, and then do just a lay of the land of agriculture in Illinois and kind of just, what you're looking at when you're driving down 55 and stuff. And then talking about some of the issues that we work on and some solutions that we're working on as well. And then save some time at the end for a Q&A. So hear from you all about what you want to see us do or things you're excited about, all that kind of fun stuff. Cool. So just as a kind of beginning stuff, so we've been around since 1975. We as a group, really are just trying to safeguard Illinois' flora and fauna and protect, public health interests and all those kind of things, especially around environmental justice. There's a lot of issues we work on there. We represent over 150 environmental organizations operating in Illinois, and we carry out our mission to advance equitable public policies at the Capitol here in Springfield and in the city of Chicago as well. We've also started delving into a little bit of federal work a bit, but we're still kind of building that out. But our bread and butter is right here in Illinois. All of these different issues we work on, you can see here, sustainable agriculture today, but also open space conservation, clean energy, equitable transportation, clean water, and zero waste. All of those too include a lot of environmental justice components that have to deal with all the separate issues. In addition, Our approach to kind of working on these things is really around like coalition building, which we'll actually talk about in the agriculture space here in a bit. Legislator education to show people what's going on here in the landscape in Illinois, and then policy advocacy itself. So going to the Capitol and, pushing for increased funding for different things or different legislative policies, all that kind of good stuff. Our affiliates, we have more than 150. You can see here, we're going to share these slides out afterwards, so you'll be able to click these links and follow all that stuff. But, the geographic scope, I mean, we cover everything from big national organizations that are part of our affiliate network, all the way down to community, community-led environmental justice organizations, Illinois organizations, regional groups, and like civics institutions. The size of these groups vary widely from being huge, like thousands of people within their groups, all the way down to just like a dozen or less. And the issue scope is pretty much everything in the environment that we covered earlier. And then in terms of our benefit structure for all these things, we've got a lot of different stuff. So, we've got policy staff here. Like I said, Chad and I are focused on agriculture, but we've got folks that are primarily just focused on conservation, water, environmental justice, transportation, all of those things. So we've got a pretty wide range of people covering topics. We're really about movement building, and really like trying to figure out how to advance public policy in Illinois, that is environmentally friendly. We've got legislative leadership. I mean, the nice thing about our organization is I think we have a lot of political clout in the Capitol. And it has led to a situation where we've actually got pretty good contacts with a lot of legislators and stuff. And I've already seen some questions in the chat. We'll definitely get to these. And factory farming, and I'm assuming you're talking about livestock production, is something that we're definitely going to focus on here. So hang tight for a minute. Office resources, we've got 2 offices, one in Chicago, one at Springfield, ability to host meetings, all that kind of fun stuff, if that's something you're interested in. Lots of communication support. We've got a really great social media team and communications team here at IEC that is great at informing people about other things going on. Other organizations are working on, all that kind of fun stuff. And lastly, the one thing that you can do as an affiliate is help inform our strategy. Because while we've got subject matter experts that work here, a lot of the times we're looking to our affiliates to figure out where we want to go with our policy and to kind of help shape the road that we travel in the end. So it's a really important part of our work. In fact, tomorrow we're actually doing our second issue call for agriculture and food systems to figure out where we want to go legislatively in 2025. So those are the kind of things that you get to participate in as an affiliate. And then why 101s? It's because it's what we do. We really enjoy being able to do just real high level breakdowns of the topics that we work on. And also just overviews of like the legislative process and how all of that plays out in Springfield or Chicago or what have you. And today, obviously, agriculture and food systems. And just as a reminder, if you want to keep up to date with all this stuff, becoming a member or signing up for our email list is a great way to see what's going on in the space. So to the topic at hand, lay of the land, agriculture. So as many folks probably see when they're driving down the interstates, wherever at in Illinois, as long as you get out of the city, there's a heck of a lot of fields out there. Illinois hosts what many consider to be some of the most fertile soil in the world. It is, I mean, if you dig down here, people talk about black dirt, and it's nutritionally dense, very, very healthy soil. And it's because Illinois is, quote unquote, the prairie state. We had thousands of years of perennial grasslands covering Illinois before agriculture took over. And this included things like bison grazing across the land. And it's interesting because these are the kinds of things that existed before ag that we're now starting to think about using more of to improve soil health. And we'll get more into that later, but I just wanted to say that is like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel on some of this. Some of it existed long before we even got here. Roughly 75% of our state land is an active row crop ag right now. The big things that are the industries like to focus on, we're the number 2 producer of corn in the United States. We are the number 1 producer of soybeans. And with corn and soybeans both, there are some counties in Illinois that are the leading producers in the country as well. And then another fun fact, we're also the leading export producer of pumpkins and horseradish in the United States too, just as kind of a interesting niche thing. Southern Illinois is actually really good at hosting soil for horseradish and all this stuff. So it's kind of a fun little tidbit on the ag side. And all of this is to say, like, a lot of people think like this means that we're producing like a lot of food in Illinois, right? For people here. And that's not as clear. And we will get into that here in a bit. So covering some of the stakeholders that work in Illinois that we have to kind of contend with, like especially I think about in the capital and those kind of things on the policy side. There are major companies and trade groups that really have big political sway in Springfield. Illinois Farm Bureau is probably the biggest one that we have to contend with, not just on agriculture policy, but a number of other topics that we work on, including energy and water and things of that nature. They are an affiliate or they're a member organization. Basically, if you have a farm or you have insurance through like Country or any of those folks, you are automatically a Farm Bureau member. That has allowed them to really build up a group of a huge amount of farmers like within their membership, which gives them a lot of sway. They have people, basically in every county in the state represented. So they have a lot of constituents that are also able to contact legislators, which is a big deal. Some of the other commodity groups that work closely with the Farm Bureau that we also speak with frequently are the Illinois Soybean Growers Association, the Illinois Corn Growers Association, Illinois Beef Association, and the Illinois Pork Producers are all very big players as well. Many of the times they will default to Farm Bureau for advocacy work, but they are present in the Capitol. Trade groups that are involved too, just as a couple examples, the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association that represents obviously, fertilizer manufacturers, but also like people that are making pesticides and herbicides, those kind of things. And then the Illinois Grain and Feed Association. Private companies also do play a role in the Capitol as well. I just highlighted like a few big players, being ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. They're based in Decatur and are a massive ethanol producer and involved with soybeans and a lot of other things. Bayer is a chemical company and pharmaceutical company. They are the ones that have acquired Monsanto, which is a name that a lot of people is like a buzzword for a long time, which you don't see as much anymore, but that's just because Bayer owns them and kind of absorbed the name. Tyson, obviously Tyson chicken, a lot of the chicken that you see at the grocery stores is made by them. Smithfield is a huge pork producer as well. And again, a lot of pork you'll see at the grocery store will come from Smithfield. And those are the quote unquote factory kind of farm models that were talked about earlier. Sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay, I'm admitting somebody right now. All right. And then stakeholders on the agricultural services and regulation side. So this is more the folks that are, adopting policies in Illinois and they monitor what's going on. Illinois Department of Agriculture, obviously, they look over all things ag. So like seed regulations and fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, livestock production, and like things like apiaries. They also cover the cannabis and hemp industry in Illinois is under the Department of Agriculture. So obviously, what they provide in the Capitol is agency expertise and reviews to see if bills that are going through are going to impact their operations, what they need to do to enforce those kind of things, et cetera. The Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, another one, they do a lot of water quality monitoring. So they do some tangential things that are related to agriculture. And we'll get more into nutrient runoff and all those kind of things. But they are getting more into non-point source water contamination, which is something we'll expand on in a bit, but kind of a new move for the agency, even in the last couple of years. So interested to kind of see how that develops. And then lastly, Illinois Soil and Water Conservation Districts. These guys are really the boots on the ground to provide technical assistance to farmers to adopt practices that, help create healthier soil and water, and also connect farmers with like grant opportunities that are out there, either from the feds or from private groups. Yeah, and to help them with those kind of things. One I didn't mention on here too is like U of I, like extension is another really big educational tool for farmers as well that I should have put on here that I totally blanked on. Next slide. So here are the big things. So I could talk for hours about different things in the agriculture space, but to keep this somewhat concise and a high level, we wanted to focus on three big things that we're currently working on. The first one, keeping food local. Second, a poorly regulated livestock industry in Illinois, and I guess to where the factory farm discussion came up earlier. And then the third issue, just how do we increase conservation practices on ag land in Illinois and reduce synthetic inputs? And I'll get more into what exactly that means here in a bit. So keeping food local, despite the fact that we have 75% of our state land masses in active row crop ag, currently over 95% of the food that we consume in Illinois is being imported from out of state. So all the corn you see on 55, none of it basically is being consumed by people. If you took an ear of corn out of one of those fields and boiled it and ate it, it would taste terrible. That's lost on a lot of people, I think. That corn that we're growing is either going to two major things. One is going to livestock feed that is helping feed the kind of the CAFO, industrial ag farm industry, and then ethanol, which is obviously something from an environmental perspective is a very mixed bag. Although they claim that it burns cleaner, the carbon benefit and like basically burning a cleaner fuel is basically lost once you start factoring in the amount of carbon and things that it takes in order to produce that corn in the first place and then get it to a plant and have it processed. So it's not exactly a friendly alternative environmentally. And then, in addition to this, just with food in Illinois, we have over 1 million residents right now that are living in food insecure areas. There's different words for this. Food desert is one that's used a lot. A more modern term that people are using is food apartheid, that you might see. But the bottom line is that residents of Illinois, many of whom, and this includes both urban and rural areas, do not have easy access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Where we're at here in Springfield and downstate Illinois, grocery stores are few and far between in a lot of areas down here. And the closest thing that somebody might have to a grocery store is like a Dollar General or something, which isn't exactly going to go out of its way to provide healthy foods. A lot of it's, overly processed things of that nature. Sorry, but admit a couple more people in. Okay, I think we're good. So keeping food local, so in short, Illinois has like one of the least diversified and least local serving agricultural systems in the country. We are essentially a monocrop system. Corn and soy dominate the landscape. Because of this and the use of herbicides and pesticides on those like kind of crops, it's really shoved out the ability for a lot of people to grow food, especially on scale to help feed communities. And this is really a direct result of industrialized food production, which is a big theme among all these topics that we're going to talk about. We're essentially living in a situation where there are a handful of companies that are controlling the vast majority of the means of production. And that has led to a situation where people that actually want to do the right thing, like farmers that want to start up and say, like, I want to do something different, makes it very, very difficult for them to get into the marketplace because they're competing against multi-billion-dollar multinational companies. So the system has largely been made for the big companies and not the little guys, which is something that we are focusing on as an organization, along with a number of our partners. And like I said, sometimes the situation can seem pretty grim, but I don't think all hope is lost. There are things happening in the food space right now that are, I think, moving in the right direction. Like in recent years, Illinois has started acknowledging this problem. The local food infrastructure grant is something that was just formally adopted by the legislature this year that provides funding for basically building out local food infrastructure things, whether it's expanding storage for foods. I mean, Chad, some farms that have examples of this.
It was designed to be the most flexible type of grant. So if someone needed a freezer truck to do deliveries, or if they needed as far as a livestock processing facility, they could upgrade their kill rooms or various types of things that could be added to their facility to make them more profitable and handle more livestock, but really pretty open.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great program. It's one of these things that we kind of need because there are a lot of subsidies at the federal level and the state that already exist um, to basically fund commodity crops. Corn and soy is like one of the most heavily subsidized things in the United States. And money going towards local producers. And like this picture is an example. This is Garlic Eastgate Farms. This is in McHenry County. I went and visited, and they're making garlic like organically, basically. And it's a really, really cool operation. And things like local food infrastructure grant allows them to build out facilities for processing and all that kind of fun stuff. There's also been a lot of movement on cottage food reform. So this is like, home kitchen related things where people can sell things at farmers markets or privately. A big shout out to Illinois Stewardship Alliance for being a big part of that, and with the local food infrastructure grant. We definitely wouldn't have that done without their expertise and knowledge from farmers and producers and all those kind of great things. Grocery initiative's a big one that's like starting like small grocery stores, improving the regs around farmers markets so there's more uniformity depending on what county you're in is a big thing. I'm working on food procurement reform with Chicago Food Policy Action Council and Stewardship Alliance about trying to get state agencies to start procuring food from like local sources and not just going to companies. And also procuring food that's like sustainably raised and has workplace like ethics kind of requirements and those kind of things. So we make sure that the workers that are working in these facilities are actually being paid a living wage and being provided those kind of things. And then lastly, kind of related to that, like improving school lunch options. We worked with legislators a couple of years ago to remove the low bid requirement for food purchasing in Illinois, which was a big deal. Illinois' procurement system is notoriously not fun to deal with, but that was a big win. And we're going to try to expand that in a lot of different ways. And as always, we're always seeking more state investments in this work. The nice thing, I think, from a legislative perspective is that things like the local food infrastructure grant and the grocery initiative and even cottage food reform were very bipartisan. This is about small businesses. It's about supporting local communities. And it's already been very successful, a lot of the money that's been spent, and it's very demonstrable, which is great. And then there's other ways that we can like continue to move in the right direction as well. Just reducing the regulatory barriers for the growth and sale of local food, especially in like meat processing and those kind of things, which is it's regulated from a public health standpoint, but there's also standards that are being put on very small producers that are the same standards that are being put on Tyson, right? And that's not the way that it should be. And then incentive programs to provide land access for like people who want to enter farming for the first time. And that includes people coming from, trying to build more equity into the ability for people to get on the landscape. It's a big problem in Illinois because right now, like 20,000 an acre, something like that for farmland.
Higher some places.
Higher in some places. So getting started for a lot of people is almost an impossibility. But those are things we're working on as well. And then reforming state government procurement, like I said, to purchase locally grown, sustainable, and ethically sourced producers. Next issue we're going to talk about is the livestock industry in Illinois. And I'm going to hand this over to Chad. Chad, you want to start with just talking about like your farm and like kind of where you came from and stuff?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a farm family, so my entire life I have been involved in farming and dealt with, the variances in agriculture over the years, seen ups and downs, and but the last uh, I've sold the last 20 some years, I have been growing specialty crops and selling them through various outlets, including farmers markets, pastured operations. Healthy, strong animals is what we strive to produce, which leads into the industry. The livestock industry in Illinois has definitely changed in my lifetime. I've seen pastures plowed up and these large buildings being built all across Illinois. The livestock industry here in Illinois is governed by the Livestock Management Facilities Act. It's definitely, the industry has outgrown it, has definitely become outdated, and it's been quite a few years since anyone's really taken a look and looked at making any real changes to make this industry, better for our environment. The monopolization of this is also part of the reason for the increase. Just like Elliot mentioned earlier, there's just a very few companies. In fact, I think it's basically four that are in control of this industry, and they have extreme power, both at the state level and at the federal level. Some of the main issues with this, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is that the waste from these facilities sometimes can be higher than, one facility can have a higher waste rate than a small city. For the most part, these practices are self-governed by the operation with their records that are available if an inspection is brought up. Of course, the nutrient loss issue in Illinois here is we've struggled with for years, and this could be one of the major issues why we're having these problems. Some ideas that could help with this is, and in fact, we have been to the rural areas of Illinois and have actually sat down at people's kitchen tables. And some of their issues, of course, are that there is almost no say by a local government or a local landowner. So as I said earlier, it's very outdated. There used to be a process where a informational hearing would be held. There had been no informational hearings on the possibility of these being built since 2019. Some of the reason for that is, as I mentioned earlier, is that the industry has kind of outgrown the regulations. So the lack of public input, county boards have no say over the matter at all. I lost it.
No, you're good. And I think, highlighting some of this is, I'll say this. We've been working on this issue for a bit. Getting any movement on factory farming in Illinois has been notoriously difficult. But one of the things that Chad has been doing is going out and talking with folks in rural communities about the issues that they're seeing on the ground, which we've kind of highlighted a couple of things here. And Chad just talked about, like, one, the lack of public participation in the siting of these facilities is something that needs changed. There is no local control. County boards have no legal authority to stop these, even though there's been multiple instances where the county boards have said, we do not want this facility coming here. So it's a fairly common occurrence. And then just from the environmental side, increasing the oversight of air and water pollution from these facilities. I often tell people, this is the only industry I know of that is legally allowed to take all of the waste that they produce and just put it on the land. Most other industries have very stringent guidelines for how this stuff is, how waste is used and how it's stored. And this is the only one that I know of that pretty much gets free reign over the entire state of Illinois, which is disconcerting. There's some people that are applying manure at rates that are very bad. It's just, it's untenable. Most of it's washing off into our rivers and streams and lakes and all those good things. It causes fish kills. All of this is going down to the hypoxic zone in the Gulf, which we'll talk a little bit more later. And it's just one of these things that needs to be adduced, or one of these things that needs to be addressed. In addition, odor mitigation is like one of the biggest things that we see complaints about. If anybody's been driving in rural Illinois and driven past one of these facilities, and when I say past, I mean maybe within a couple miles of one, you will smell it and you'll realize why neighbors get really upset when one of these facilities goes in, because the setbacks from people's properties and these kind of things are just not adequate for addressing that. So something big we're working on. Yeah, so we're going to move on to this next topic. Lastly, just increasing conservation practices and reducing synthetic inputs. Where I live down in Auburn, which is just south of Springfield, in the last couple of years, we've dealt with a pretty scary situation. I'm sure some of you have seen there's been dust storms that have been occurring down here, not just in Sangamon County, but in surrounding ones. And it has led to some pretty, horrible accidents. One in particular on I-55 in 2023, last year, led to the fatalities of multiple people on the interstate because it was essentially blackout conditions. There was a huge pileup. Multiple people passed away. Millions and millions of dollars in damage was caused by this. And this was just like a few miles from my home. We weren't in like the thickest part of it, but our whole town was covered in dust. This is a direct result of the way that we are treating soil right now. Farmers have been largely pigeonholed into a system from the seed producers and like the people that are going to use the seeds to produce other things, that they need to be out there over-tilling the soil. They're not using cover crops. There's like a lot of different things. And I don't say this to bash farmers either, which is kind of an important part of this. I think that more than anything, the system has kind of forced them into these practices, telling them this is how you're going to maximize your yield every year. But in a lot of ways, that is not accurate. We continue to see that there are conservation practices that can be adopted that can actually help increase yields in corn and soy if people want to go that way. But in the short term, these dust storms are just continually getting worse with the advent of more like a changing climate, higher temperatures and winds and these kind of things. I don't see this problem going away anytime soon. As you can see from these, the maps and all these things, that drought conditions continue to be a prevalent issue during certain times of year, and will continue to be as warmer temperatures keep happening in the U.S. The other kind of side of this, outside of, well, it's included in the nutrients and like the farming practices themselves, but is the over reliance on synthetic inputs, and that means a couple different things. One, over application of fertilizer, like I said, is doing things like increasing the hypoxic zone in the Gulf. That is this picture on the right. That's roughly the size of New Jersey. It is essentially an area where the Mississippi drains into the Gulf, and it's carrying nitrogen and phosphorus and all these other chemicals down there. That creates what is called a dead zone. It's an oxygen depleted area of the ocean that's actually very much harming the fishing industry down there and just hurting, wildlife in general. Illinois continues to be one of the leading, we always trade off with like Minnesota and Iowa, but we're like the leading contributor of nitrogen and phosphorus into the Mississippi. There's going to be a scenario at some point where there's a reckoning legally with our state and southern states about how we're impacting industry down there. And I would hope that we can get ahead of this before that becomes the case. The other things that we're looking at too on synthetic inputs are just like herbicide and pesticide application. Um, as you see on the left, this was actually a story that just came out. Migratory monarch populations are severely down in certain parts of the country this year, and I think they're still trying to get a handle on it. But we know from research that the overuse of pesticides is having a detrimental effect on native insects, which we rely on for pollinating in our entire ag system anyways, which is kind of ironic. We continue to see study after study showing that, bee populations are going down, or monarchs, or all these other pollinator species that we very much rely on, whether or not people notice it or not. The other thing we're seeing is herbicide drift. The industry right now is heavily applying things in Illinois like dicamba, which is used in soybean production. 2,4-D is another chemical. And I think it was produced by DuPont originally. And then the ones that you hear about like all the time, like Roundup, which is glyphosate, and then atrazine. There's a study that was put together by our friends at Prairie Rivers Network that was presented to the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, showing that there was essentially damage on every single property they surveyed in Illinois. We're also hearing that the Illinois Natural History Survey has produced a report and given it to the DNR and to the governor's office, saying that 99% of the samples that they took in from Illinois property had damage from herbicide drift. This is a massive problem. These are taxpayer funded, taxpayer protected sites in Illinois, and there is legitimate chemical trespass happening on these sites. So we're the ones that are going to have to deal with this. And the ag community has not stepped up in the ways that they should on this, frankly. And it's one of the things that we work on in the Capitol. Solutions for conservation adoption, going back to what we talked about earlier. The big ones, there's like the fall covers for spring savings program. That's our state's cover crop discount program. It provides $5 per acre for every acre of cover crops that are put in on a field. It's been wildly successful. It sells out every year. We continue working, even with commodity groups, Illinois Soybean Association in particular, to help increase this funding. In addition to that, fully funding soil and water conservation districts is another big one. They took a big funding cut this year, and we want to see that restored. Expanding the state's water revolving fund at the EPA to include ag practices, which is something that we think that they're actually moving towards right now. We just haven't seen it publicly yet. So we're kind of excited about that. And then just providing more funding for things like monitoring wells on rivers for EPA so they can know what kind of nutrient loads are happening. Because all of that data can help inform what we need to be doing here in Illinois to help reduce nutrient runoff. On the pesticide and synthetic sides, we need reform and enforcement of the Illinois Pesticide Act. In this picture, you can see this is on the far right, that's Kim from Prairie Rivers Network. We had Senator Sally Turner with us out to a property just north of Decatur to view herbicide damage in a Nature Preserve Commission site. As she kind of explained, some of the areas of this property are miles away from the nearest field that had any kind of spraying done, which is showing like how far this stuff's traveling. What it really highlights is that there's volatile versions of some chemicals that may just need to be banned going forward. Dicamba and 2,4-D in particular, there are certain versions of those that travel longer and they stay active longer. So we're still examining how we go about this, but it's something that's being discussed. But then things like further increasing the setback distances from sensitive areas, from schools, parks. Specialty crops is a big one too. There's orchards in Southern Illinois that produce millions of dollars worth of goods that are having millions of dollars worth of damage done to them from herbicide drift. So this isn't just impacting natural areas, it's also impacting agriculture and people that are growing things outside of the corn and soybean market. And then lastly, just ensuring that the Department of Agriculture has the staff and resources to address complaints. From what we know, talking to department officials, they get a lot of complaints, and having the manpower to go out and examine these sites and do the legwork that's needed is very difficult, and they just don't have enough people. So that's one of the other things we work on as well. Yeah, and then just like, again, the drifting herbicides like dicamba and 2,4-D are damaging, landscapes across Illinois. The Illinois Pesticide Act, again, is not set up to take into a damage um, on these properties. Actually, this is a copy from a conservation slide, I think, but this is like one of those issues that falls squarely within agriculture and conservation. It's like an open space issue. So trying to thread the needle and bring the conservation community together with ag partners to figure out how we can work on this. With that, we are at, actually, I did pretty freaking good timing. I had 15 minutes left for the Q&A, and we're right at 12:44. Unfortunately, Chelsea couldn't be with us today. She's feeling under the weather, but she's our chief of staff. So that's her contact info, and then my email and Chad's. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can look at you all. Cool, that's great. Awesome, but thank you all so much for listening. With that, happy to open it up to questions. If you want to raise your hand virtually or drop something in the chat to stack, whatever you're most comfortable with. But with that, I see Nicole Salisbury from Sierra Club has got her hand up. So I will, Nicole, I'll let you kick it off.
All right, thanks a lot. You guys did a wonderful job. First things, in terms of the slides, will they be available too along with the recording?
Yep. Yeah. So I think after this, I talked to our comm staff. We're going to share the slides and we'll share out links to the recording because I think we're going to put this on YouTube or something like that.
Okay. And also, so the only way right now to get access to fresh fruits and vegetables for the most part throughout the state is pretty much through these farmers markets. Is that correct?
I mean, I think that's largely true. I mean, you can obviously go to a grocery store right now and get stuff, but that's all not being grown in Illinois. Like none of it is basically.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, Chad, unless you know any other, but
Yeah, some select stores will have like right up front in their produce section, they will have like a highlighted local farmer. But it's very small number of farmers that are in that type of scenario and even less amount of stores. A lot of farm stands in this last couple years that I've become aware of. So check your local area for a farm stand. A lot of farm stands are working with up to, I know a lady that's working with 37 different farmers. And so she is a location where all those farmers bring their stuff and make it great for communities that have access to that type of coordination between farmers.
Okay. So, but pretty much all in all, the grocery stores that we see around here, the majority of the produce comes from out of state.
That would be correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The majority of it is coming from like California, areas of the Southwest, South America, Central America, from all over the place.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing too, kind of related to what you were saying, I tried to look for like a silver lining out of the pandemic. One of them was definitely the fact that people started asking about where food was coming from, largely because there was a very short period at the beginning where we started seeing people going to grocery stores and things running out. And people started to ask, like, why is that? Why don't we have this stuff in abundance? Where's it going? And it was a really interesting kind of situation where people started to really wonder, like, how do we prevent this from happening again? And part of this is like, we need to build resilience into the food system because in the wake of something, again, like another pandemic or some kind of natural disaster, and that is, I think, even more telling now because we see these dust storms and all these things. And there's a real possibility that there could be like a huge failure in part of the food system that causes massive, shortages of different goods. And we've seen this in small instances in the past. So part of this local food proliferation is good for, nutrition and these kind of things and getting people food when they need it. But also just building resilience into the system so we don't have to deal with a really scary situation down the line. Let me see. Is there anybody else that wants to come off mic for a question? I'm gonna try to look through the chat, but happy to dig down on anything if people have got some ideas or stuff.
Yeah, I had a couple things.
Yeah.
For the local food issues, I would just had a question on, since there are problems with like food deserts and stuff. I live in Payson, so live in a food desert. We have
Yeah.
Dollar General and a small gas station, so I totally understand. But how come we can't pass policies or I guess have like subsidies for other diverse crops, like to encourage rural farmers to provide fresh foods in these food deserts?
That's a great question. I'll probably let Chad talk about a little bit of this. Part of the issue, I think, is, like I said, right now there are crazy subsidies for corn and soy. I mean, that is an industry that just has a lot of has a lot of money behind it. And getting people to think outside the box and grow things that are different is just difficult. In a lot of ways, one of the issues we also see too practically is that if I went to my insurance agent and I wanted to get coverage for like a corn or soybean operation, it'd be very easy. You could go in there and get it. If I want to go in there, and maybe I'll let Chad tell this story, because Chad, you tried to get insurance for your stuff, right? At one point.
Right, yep. The insurance and the money lending situation are both kind of identical. In order for you to, the specialty crop insurance, they've had lots of excuses. It's very, most people growing specialty crops grow a wide range of crops. So it's not like even, I mean, 30 acres would be a lot of something to have. Now, like in our pumpkin industry and stuff like that, where it's a monocrop, that would be easier to do, but it's, the insurance companies have just pushed back on how to make it fair for everybody is probably the main thing. And in lending, when I originally decided to start growing specialty crops, when I went to the same person that I'd gotten money for my other farm practices, they thought that that was a good idea, but yet at the same time, they could not offer me the securities needed for my success. So that kind of falls across lots of different areas in the small agricultural type of growing scenarios.
That makes sense. And then the second one, I was thinking about the CAFOs and issues. Again, living in a rural area, my father's worked on a hog farm his whole life. I know how bad they can smell. And then also being in the water sector, obviously worrying about non-point source pollution, terrible also. But with my work with Prairie Rivers Network, I've been working on the energy sector, and a lot of the like Department of Energy grants are now requiring people to do what are called community benefit agreements and plans. And through those discussions, we've learned that like some local communities are pretty much like passing local policies that any kind of energy siting project that's coming in has to put one of these community benefit agreements together, just going over different benefits that like the company is going to be bringing to the community, any issues the community has. And I was wondering, could this be an option for like local communities? Like, could they say no, CAFOs are allowed to come into our community unless they do X, Y, and Z? Or is that out of their realm?
Well, I'll say this. I actually love that idea. I haven't thought about that. And that's why I love having these calls, because it can bring some different perspectives on things. But having some kind of community benefit agreement on siting is something that I would be interested in actually exploring a bit more. So I'm glad you brought that up. Right now, they really legally can't. So under the Livestock Management Facilities Act, counties boards really only have the ability to call a hearing on a facility if it meets a certain number of what's called animal units at a facility. And then besides that, that's basically all they can do. They can call a vote if they want, just to see if people want it, but it's non-binding. And there have been many instances where county boards have actually voted no on facilities, and they've been cited anyways. So,
yeah, that's what I was wondering, because it's the same thing with the community benefit agreements. Like they sound great, but it's also a lot of work for the community, and sometimes there's not any legal,
yeah,
repercussions if this company doesn't follow it. But it would be great if it did.
Yeah.
And I would add that when they had these informational hearings, the concerns that like the smell, water concerns, all those were not part of the things that could be discussed. It was primarily whether the concrete had the right strength, setbacks from local. So any of those things that have ever been tried to be brought up to IDOA during these hearings are dismissed because it doesn't qualify for the conversation.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It would be nice if we had something that was, like the community focused on their needs, obviously. But yeah, if they don't have any authority to back it up, I don't know how that would work. But
Yeah, no, but that's interesting though. And I mean, we're generating right now ideas for policy changes next year to strengthen the act and stuff. So that's definitely something I'll look forward to. So thanks for bringing that up.
yeah, thanks, guys.
Nicole?
Yes, what other states consume most of the crops that they grow? And how can Illinois be like that state? Now I know there's differences in weather. I mean, Illinois can't be California because
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
different soil, different weather, et cetera, ecology, whatever.
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if I could tell you that there is a state that's like the majority of the food they're eating is not imported right now.
Especially out of season.
Especially out of season. So, I mean, I'll say this just with a caveat. Obviously, Illinois can't produce everything. We don't have the right like weather and soil, like Nicole, like you said, to just like, have a thriving banana market. Like it's not going to happen, right? So we have to be realistic about some of this. But the fact of the matter is that we're still importing 95% of what we're consuming. A lot of that could be made in Illinois. I don't know what a realistic percentage would be in terms of like what we want to like produce here and consume here. But it's something that's being talked about a lot. The other side of this with shipping this stuff is the carbon footprint of that. One of the things we tell people a lot is the most environmentally friendly food that you can get is one that is produced close to you, and is then consumed by you, basically. The shorter the distance between a plot of ground and people's tables is ultimately the best thing. So, yeah, sorry, Nicole. I'm sure that doesn't completely really answer your question. It's one of those things that maybe we don't know a lot of ways.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. I see Amy putting some good stuff in the chat. Thank you there. I saw there was a question about Illinois or the not Illinois Farm Bureau, the federal farm bill. That's something we're following closely right now. The farm bill has two major components. One is like you think about like the SNAP program and those kind of things, that's all born out of farm bill. The other side of it is the actual like agriculture side, and that's where like the subsidies for corn and soy are, but also a lot of conservation programs are within farm bill as well. We've been working because they're I think 2 years behind now on farm bill, and it sounds like there is no way they're going to get it done before the election. Just not going to happen. So people are watching it closely, but one of the things that came out of something like the Inflation Reduction Act was a lot of money earmarked for farm bill conservation programs that help reduce the carbon impact of farming. So we're pushing to still have those included. There is actually a push by a number of conservative lawmakers to completely strip that out of farm bill completely. And we're fighting against that with folks like National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and a number of our other ag and conservation partners. So working closely on that. I'm looking at other comments. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Sorry, I was looking at this one from Carrie on here, I believe. I was gonna say, and I'm gonna put my email in the chat. So anything you want to share afterwards, definitely just share with me and we'll get back to you and stuff. Is only private insurance available or is government funded, Chad? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know of any government funding.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, that's the other thing that's kind of interesting with this. Like that insurance basically ensures that even if there's a failure in the corn and soybean, like like in a year.
Right.
That they're still gonna get paid. Unfortunately, that has allowed people to basically just have this mindset that why would I grow anything else? Because even if this doesn't work, I'm still gonna get money for it. Guaranteed. And that has kind of allowed people to stay in the same system and made them a little more hesitant to do different things. Let's see if I'm missing anything. I think that's everything in here. We're at 12:58. Does anybody else have any questions that they would want to ask before we end this guy?
Good job.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nicole, and thank you all for your questions and everything. I'm gonna put my email in the chat really quick, just so folks have got it.
And we have begun to build.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I want to let Chad. Okay, so if anybody's interested in learning more about the CAFO side and livestock, all right, Chad.
We've started over the summer here building a coalition of restructuring the livestock industry in Illinois. We've had several meetings. We're planning a town hall later on this fall in the Peoria area. In order to change anything with the livestock industry here in Illinois, even though I'm a farmer and I'm trying to do things, you know, that are right for nature and for people, it's just not enough voice coming out of me. So the more people we have that can understand where the problems and even the problems that are coming at the future for our next generations out of this industry, please feel free to email us, and we'd love to have you join Changing Livestock here in Illinois.
Yep, I got Chad and I's emails both in the chat, so please save those and we'll get back to you. But with that, definitely excited to talk to you more. I'm already seeing a lot of stuff in the chat, so excited to follow up with people. But with that, we'll let folks go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you all for joining. Appreciate it.